Hello everybody, welcome to the studio. Hopefully you're all having amazing creative days. So today we're going to be talking about this lens right here. This is the new FD 50mm f1.8, and what makes this lens so special is what it doesn't have. Now, all the other lenses in the new FD lineup have a super Spectra coating, whereas this one just has a Spectra coating, giving it a really unique look amongst all the other nFD lenses. So if you want to learn more about this lens, definitely stick around. I'm going to talk about this lens. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on shooting with new FD lenses. But before we get into that, this lens is very special to me because it's the very first vintage lens I ever owned. I got this when I was 15 years old, and I was shooting with it in high school, shooting all my friends. I shot pictures with this lens for the high school yearbook. I was part of the photo club, and that's pretty awesome. And then when I was 25 years old, I started my photography business. Now I'm 44 and I'm still running my photography business, and there's nothing else I would rather be doing. I love photography. And now, I've got this YouTube channel and I'm sharing my experience and my wisdom and my knowledge with all of you, hopefully to inspire the next generation of photographers. But yeah, since this was my very first vintage lens I ever owned, I figured this would be a good candidate to make my first ever vintage lens review video. With that being said, let's review the lens. All right, so this lens was released in 1979, long time ago. The format for 35mm, but you can mount this to APS-C, and if you put this on an APS-C censored camera, it becomes about an 80mm, which is an absolutely perfect portrait focal length. So if you're shooting with APS-C and you want a good portrait lens, this is definitely a lens to consider. The mount is an FD mount. The front filter thread is 52mm. It has 5 aperture blades, which is not the best, but it's okay. Aperture range goes from f1.8 to f22. Minimum focus distance is 0.6 meters, and that's not the greatest, but it's okay. You can always use some sort of adapter if you want to get even closer with this lens. Weight is a very nice 170 grams, meaning you can pop this in your pocket and take it with you, and you don't have to worry about it at all, other than the fact that it's not weather sealed. So this doesn't have any weather sealing, and optical design is 6 elements in 4 groups. All right, so the older FD lenses were all metal housings. These nFDs, new FDs, are all plastic. So these are plastic housings, although the bayonet mount on the back is metal, everything else is plastic, and the lenses are glass, which is very cool. But yeah, these new nFDs had ribbed aperture rings, as you can see here, and then they had triangular shaped focus rings. So when you're not looking at the lens and you're trying to operate it, you can feel what your fingers are touching based on the texture, which is really cool. And this is a design language you can see in all nFD lenses, which is pretty awesome. So here's the collection I have so far, and yeah, you can see the similar design language across all the lenses. And despite these lenses being made out of plastic, their build quality is pretty robust. They've lasted the years, and this lens, I gotta say, is finally starting to fail on me. The aperture just died on me, and I'm starting to notice some haze inside the glass. So that's something I'm gonna have to do probably in a future video. I'm gonna take apart this lens. We're gonna re-grease the aperture and clean all the lens elements and put it back together. And I've never done that before, so that's gonna be kind of fun. But now let's talk about how to mount this lens onto a modern mirrorless camera. All right, so this is the Canon AE1 program with the nFD 50mm f1.8, and this was given to me as a gift when I was 15 years old. This was a nice little present for me, and in high school I spent a lot of time shooting pictures with this, a lot of film shots with the 50 and the Canon AE1 program. The only thing that sucked about this camera was the battery. If you forgot to turn it off after you put it in your camera bag, you'd come back to the camera and the battery would be dead. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. So now we are in the world of mirrorless cameras. So we're going to set this aside, and here we have the Canon EOS R. And in order to mount these lenses onto modern cameras, you need an adapter. This is my favorite of the adapters for nFD lenses, or any kind of FD. So if you shoot with FL lenses, nFD lenses, or FD lenses, they all are FD mount. So this is the PhotoDiox Pro FD to EOS R adapter. So we'll set it to open. Pop it on there, lock it so we have access to the aperture, and then we mount it to the camera. There we go. And there's one more setting you have to change in the Canon menu. Video about it over there if you want to check it out. And that allows you to release the shutter without the lens, so you can actually shoot photos with the mirrorless cameras. All right, so let me give you a pro tip on using these nFD lenses. So these lenses will shoot kind of cool, and that's by design. So what I mean by that is cool tones will be accentuated and look extra cool. So your shadows might look just plain old blue in your shots. And that's normal for nFD lenses, and that's by design, like I said, because film naturally had more warm tones to it. So Canon compensated by creating lenses with cool tones. So you mix the warm tones with the cool tones and you get true tones. So Canon color science at work back in the 1980s. There it is. But with modern mirrorless cameras, obviously they don't shoot warm, so you can try and up the Kelvin temperature on your camera to compensate, or better yet, get some filters. So I strongly recommend either a Tiffin enhancing filter on these old nFD lenses, or like a warming pro mist filter, or just a straight up warming filter. So that'll help compensate for the cool tones of this glass. There you go. Now you know. All right, so let's talk about the special features of this lens, or the lack thereof. So the older Canon lenses, the FD lenses, you'll notice they have the orange markings on them. Those had a Spectra coating, and a Spectra coating is just a coating that they put on the lenses during the manufacturing process, and that coating helps with light transmission and reduces ghosting and all that stuff. So it makes the images a little clearer. So when Canon upgraded to the nFD series of lenses, they created a super Spectra coating, which was a more advanced technique, and it really improved on light transmission, reduced ghosting, reduced flaring, improved color science, made images more, I guess, polished, more contrasty. So all the new FD lenses with the green and the white lettering have that coating, except for the 51.8. Why? Well, I suspect that this 51.8 was the kit lens that came out with all the cameras back in the day. So Canon probably had a huge stockpile of glass or elements with the old SC coating on it for all the 50 kit lenses that they were selling. So that rather than tossing them and making new lenses, they probably used the glass from the old FD 51.8 in the nFD 51.8, which is why this lens doesn't have the super Spectra coating. And my personal opinion, if you're into vintage glass and that vintage look, that is definitely an advantage, because all your pictures have a slight haze and a glow, and you get those muted colors. So even when colors are saturated, they're still muted and look a little bit vintagey, and that's something I really love about this lens. It has that old vintage look, and if you grew up in the 1980s and you remember watching TV and flipping through magazines back in the day, this lens produces images with those colors, and it's so cool. All right, so let's talk about focusing this lens. The focus on this lens is super easy and smooth. In fact, it's buttery smooth on my copy, and I absolutely love that. It's about 160-degree turn to go from minimum focus distance to maximum focus distance. And the little triangular shaped tactile ring is absolutely amazing if you're shooting in cold conditions, if you're shooting in the winter or something like that. The little tips prick your fingers and you can actually feel it and get a good grip on it, which is absolutely awesome. And here's a pro tip: if you're shooting with modern mirrorless cameras, you're in luck, because there's a magnifying glass, so you can actually compose your shot, hit the magnifying glass, zoom in on your subject matter, get critical focus, zoom back out, and take your shot, and that way you can ensure all your shots are nice and sharp. All right, so I'm just gonna run some photos here in the background as we talk about versatility. So is this a good lens? Yes, absolutely. It's gonna open the door to a lot of different possibilities. Like take an 85mm, for example. It's pretty much just a portrait lens. It's really good at one thing, but this 50mm focal length is good at a lot of things. It excels in a lot of different types of situations. So it's good for portraits, environmental portraits, street photography, landscapes, product shots, fashion, or if you just want to like document, daily life, you can do that with a 50mm. So if you're looking to get into vintage lens photography and you're just looking for a good starter lens, this one is absolutely awesome. You get a ton of that old vintage character, and you get the 50mm focal length, which is very easy to get compositions with. All right, so when it comes to optical performance, the first thing I'm gonna say is if you're looking for an ultra sharp, very like modern-esque, amazing vintage lens, this is not the one for you, but we all judge vintage lenses differently. For me personally, I like vintage lenses that have a lot of flaws and are soft and mushy and have all that vintage charm. If you're looking for a super sharp vintage lens, go look for a Leica or something like that, get a Zeiss, and those will be clinically sharp, but those are so sharp, they look like modern glass, so you might as well just buy modern glass at that point. So there's no vintageness to those vintage lenses, other than the fact that you have to manually focus them. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Maybe that's not a popular opinion, but those are my thoughts. Yeah, so back to the lens, optical performance. Just like most vintage lenses from this era, wide open at 1.8, it's not very sharp. You're gonna see a lot of softness in the center and the corners. Stop it down to f2.8, f3.5, f4, and it sharpens up really nicely. Again, you're gonna get a little vignette and stuff in the corners. In terms of flaring and ghosting, if you're shooting towards a very bright light source, you're gonna get a lot of flaring. That's just normal for this kind of lens, especially with the Spectra Coating. It doesn't really handle really bright lights very well. You'll also lose a lot of contrast if you're shooting, let's say, towards the sun. And then there's the chromatic aberration, which is kind of like par for the course with vintage lenses. So you're gonna get a lot of that when you're shooting in very contrasty situations. I mean, obviously modern RF glass or modern Sony's or Nikon lenses have coatings which prevent that chromatic aberration from happening, but with these old lenses, just expect it to be there. It's gonna be there. It's just part of life with vintage lenses. And again, me personally, I think that just adds to the charm of vintage lenses. Another thing to mention is that there's halation, natural halation with this lens because of the coatings. So if you're shooting portraits of people, for example, that halation will cause skin tones to soften. So skin tones will soften and look less contrasty. So if you're shooting somebody with blemishes or wrinkles and they want to look younger, more youthful, this lens will naturally kind of soften out the skin without using Photoshop and those kinds of tricks to kind of soften the skin. So, I mean, that's kind of cool in its own kind of way. All right, so now let's talk about bokeh. And again, all these photos that I'm showing you in this video are gonna be posted on my blog post. So check out the link in the description if you wanna go to the blog post and look at these photos at your own leisure. So yeah, bokeh, here we are shooting my buddy Optimus at minimum focus distance. And you can see in the background, the bokeh is nice. It's not too bad, it's not too busy, but there aren't any circular bokehs. Like the bokeh balls are all ovular. So that's something you're gonna experience with this lens. And if we switch to this image here, you can see that there's only a few circles in the middle that are actual circles, and then as you move out, everything becomes stretched. So that's something to look at. This lens has nice creamy bokeh, but the bokeh is definitely a little bit, I don't know how you'd say this, like zoomed or rounded or swirly or whatever the case may be. It's not swirly like a Helios 44, but there's a little, like it pushes towards the outside is what I'm trying to say here. And you'll also notice inside the bokeh, you get that onion ring pattern because of the glass here. So you can see those little circles inside the bokeh ball. So that's also something to expect with this lens. But overall, I would say, yeah, you can get a nice smooth background with this lens. It's very nice. I definitely would use it to shoot any kind of bokeh shots, or if you get some kind of extender, you can shoot nice close-up flower shots with a super creamy background. So if that's what you're into, definitely look into that. So yeah, user experience, absolutely love this lens, and take that with a grain of salt because I've had this lens for most of my life now, and you know, I'm emotionally attached to it. I really like using it. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, in terms of like focusing, it's really nice. It's really smooth. In terms of like the image characteristics, I love that vintage look, and this lens has, like I said, that Spectra coating, so you get those old vintage colors. Because of that Spectra coating, the colors don't transmit into the lens like modern glass, so everything's gonna look a little bit different, which is super cool. Absolutely love that. If you're looking to get into vintage lens photography or videography, this is a great starter lens. It's relatively cheap, although prices keep going up. Like, this is my pet peeve in the vintage lens world, is a lot of people are buying up vintage lenses and then making a little store and then upselling them 30–40%. And it's just like, this lens, you used to be able to buy this for like 30–40 bucks, and now it's like 80 bucks. So I just hate these people who buy up lenses and then resell them at a profit. Like, just leave the lenses for the people who want to enjoy vintage lenses and stop trying to turn it into a business. Like, I'm tired of that. Anyway, side rant. Overall, yeah, really happy with this lens. If you're looking to get into vintage photography, like I said, this is a great starter lens. 50mm is a great focal length. It allows you to shoot like headshots, portraits. You can get closer. You can shoot landscapes. You can shoot street, architectural, all those kinds of things, which is great. So you can buy one lens and shoot many subject matter. And if you like it, and if you like the look, you can invest in more vintage lenses and grow your collection. And if you don't like it, hey, you can just sell it, right? And as simple as that. All right, with that being said, this video is over. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. Let me know how I did on my first vintage lens review. Did I cover all the points? Did I miss anything? If I did, let me know in the comments down below and I'll take notes and I'll put that in the next vintage lens review video. I'm gonna try and do one of these every month just to, get a little momentum going because I really love vintage lenses. I love sharing my knowledge on them. And yeah, that's it. Peace out. Thanks for watching. I will see you guys in the next video as I become the Bokeh.